Blog Talk Radio.
Warning, the following program may include profane language, controversial viewpoints, and perspectives on the true nature of reality so far removed from the status quo, they'll make your head spin like a top. Young children, corporate executives, and religious fundamentalists should turn away now.
Welcome to Extraordinary Year, an online show that puts everyday people like you with questions about 2012 on the road to understanding. I'm Tim Bravo, and I'm glad you joined us tonight. 211 days until December 21st, 2012. Remember, if you like the show, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/extraordinaryyear and like us there too. In fact, you ought to head over there right now and if you're listening, because we've got links to what we're discussing tonight and lots of other interesting recent news and videos. Our guest tonight is to be filmmaker Michael J. Murphy. I have a new caller. Michael, is that you?
Yes, it is, Tim. How are you?
Excellent. Nice to hear you. Mike, you brought us this trailblazing documentary, What in the World Are They Spraying?, a couple years back. This film exposes in depth how chemtrails are not just persistent contrails, as NASA would have you believe. And it also tells you how the toxic stew being spewed from horizon to horizon in our atmosphere is wreaking havoc on our environment and every life form upon the planet. His upcoming film is called Why in the World Are They Spraying? And the official trailer for the movie points to something called geoengineering as one of the big reasons for this program that officialdom won't even acknowledge. So, Mike, welcome to the program, buddy.
Hey, Tim, thanks for covering this issue. Very important to those of us who are aware of what's happening.
Definitely. As I go back and rewatch the first movie, it just reminds me how important this issue is. And how important it is to get people to wake up to it. Now, you're going to have to forgive me because some of the questions I might ask tonight might seem like chemtrail kindergarten. I suspect there are many people listening out there who are just coming around to the realization that, these long white streaks across the sky aren't natural. In fact, our own Matt Steiny-Lawless, one of my co-hosts who can't be with us tonight, keeps telling me he's on the fence in regard to chemtrails, even though he keeps sending me pictures of them. So I hope to put some questions to rest and give everyone listening a firm foundation for discussing this topic with others. And even though I may know the answer myself, I'll be asking questions for the sake of the audience's elucidation. So let's start with what? Thanks to you, it's well known amongst the chemtrail literate population that the main ingredients of the chemtrails seem to be aluminum, barium, and strontium. That's correct, right?
Yeah, those are the main ingredients, and actually geoengineers propose spraying those specific toxins into our sky in various geoengineering symposiums. Again, they're proposing spraying 10 to 20 million tons of toxic aluminum into our skies, and what they say is that it's for the stated goal of cooling the planet. Aluminum's very reflective, and the goal is to actually block sunlight and reflect it back into space. However, since the first film, a number of studies have surfaced that indicate that these programs actually warm the planet. They do create regional temporary cooling.
Oh no, his call is dropped. Okay, well, I suspect that Mike will be calling us back. He's actually out on the road in production for the new film. That's why he's calling us on the phone. I'm not sure where he is. I suspect it's somewhere mountainous, so hopefully he'll be able to call us back from the road, and here he is.
Tim? Back.
Yeah, Mike, welcome back.
Where was I?
New information since the first film.
Since the first film, actually, a number of studies indicate that these programs actually warm the planet because in the nighttime, they trap heat. We've seen an increase in nighttime highs, an incredible increase in the past 10 years.
Well, it makes sense that if it reflects stuff out, it also reflects stuff back down. So basically, is this just an excuse then? The whole we're doing it to cool the planet business?
It definitely is, and there are a number of agendas, but it looks like the number one agenda is the corporatization of our weather, and that enables certain corporations and governments to consolidate a huge amount of power into the hands of a few. So hopefully we'll dig in real deep about that, but I'd like to talk about some of the basics of chemtrail geoengineering programs, what we're finding around the world, and what it really means to human health and ecology.
Okay. Well, other than the aluminum and the strontium and the barium that seem to be the big three that people know about, are there other ingredients people should know about?
A bunch of heavy metals are showing up: manganese, lead, other toxins. But the top three, which matches, again, what geoengineers are proposing, are aluminum, barium, and strontium. Those actually match a number of geoengineering patents that were designed to specifically spray these substances out of airplanes into the sky for the stated goal of cooling the planet through stratospheric aerosol geoengineering programs, now called solar radiation. And looks like in an attempt to confuse people, because people were waking up to the term geoengineering, now they're calling these programs climate remediation.
So are they actually acknowledging that they're doing this then? Because it seems to me that nobody is actually willing to say it's happening.
Well, geoengineers are stating that these are just models, and there's something that they may have to do. They have admitted to a little bit of experimentation. It's interesting because people are waking up around the world to this. We have a number of ordinances around the country which now are being established. One in Maui. I just got back from a 2.5-month trip in Maui, rough trip. But anyways, we started the Clean Sky Ordinance, and that's an ordinance which will effectively ban geoengineering programs on and around the county of Maui without an environmental impact statement and informed consent, which they certainly will not get because these programs are very damaging. But again, geoengineers are just stating that these are models. What they're trying to do is take programs that have been around in full-scale deployment for about 10 to 12 years, making them legal because people are waking up, and they see that ordinances are being established to ban these. So now geoengineers, in what looks like a preemptive measure, are calling for emergency legislation to get these illegal programs legal and start spraying. So it's literally a battle of time. We have to wake people up. Public officials at the very high level, as you saw in the first film when we went to Washington, D.C., are denying that these programs have been started, even though there have been a number of congressional hearings on this issue. But at the local level, at the county level, we're getting support. And in Maui, we have both public support and political support. We do have a sponsor for the bill, and right now it's going through the motions to get it on the table. So a lot of exciting things happening, but again, the damage that we've seen from these programs is really unquantifiable. Our ecosystems are collapsing very quickly. Natural organic foods are not growing, and hopefully we'll get into the reasons why.
And even with, positive moves on the forefront of this whole thing, it still remains that any aluminum that's been dumped on the land stays on the land. And they've been ramping up what they've been doing, if I understand correctly. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, actually, global dimming now is an issue that NASA and NOAA has been studying. They report a 20% decline in the sunlight reaching the Earth.
That's amazing. That's just a ridiculous number. 20%. That's a fifth.
It's very significant, and in those studies they failed to source the reason for that occurrence. NOAA has also reported a 50% increase in stratospheric aerosols in the past in years. Again, I've spoken with many atmospheric scientists. I went to an aerosol research conference. Most of the scientists were aware of these studies, but the studies failed to source the aerosols and failed to source the composition of those aerosols. We know what they are because rain tests now have been coming in from around the world. And those are showing what we call the geoengineering or chemtrail fingerprint of aluminum, barium, and strontium. The metals that we're finding were not there 12 years ago. In some cases, they've increased over 50,000 percentage points. And again, they match geoengineers' plans and they match a number of geoengineering patterns. So without question, this is happening. Here in Southern California, we have heavy trailing about 5 days a week. The morning will start off as a blue sky. The trails literally block out the sun on most days. People complain of irritability, nausea, headache, other sore throat, burning eyes, symptoms like that. So it's a deep concern on that level. But these substances are very toxic to our ecology. And what in the world are they spraying? We went up to Northern California after we went to a geoengineering conference, which we documented. And about 7 years ago, scientists in that area noticed that plant life was starting to die, the grass was not growing, and starting to see the onset of the ecosystem collapse. So they started questioning what was going on. And that area typically has an acidic soil. And they started testing the pH of the soil, and what they found was deeply disturbing. The soil pH was changing. We're talking about very significant changes, anywhere between 10 to 12 times the normal alkalinity. And people with basic science knowledge realize that plant life that requires an acidic soil will start to die when that soil pH changes, exactly what was happening. So they began to look into why this was happening and started doing rain tests. And again, they found these geoengineering substances in the rain in very, very high quantities. So it was a deep concern of the people in Northern California. And other people have been noticing significant declines in their solar uptake. And Dane Wigington, who is a solar expert, he owns the largest solar-powered home in Northern California, noticed he was getting about a 60% decline on some days of his solar power, and he took note that it was the trails from these aerosols. He really got behind the movement and started conversing with scientists, and again came up with these damaging substances.
So, what planes are they using? Is it just like special planes that are doing this, like maybe military planes or black ops planes, or are we talking commercial craft too?
Well, there are a number of corporations, including governments, who are involved with this. So many different airplanes, a lot of them being military, who are involved with these programs. That's going to be in my third film. I'm really going to dig into who is doing this. The investigation for the first film was what they're spraying. We conclusively proved aluminum, barium, and strontium. The second film is why in the world are they spraying, and we take a very close look at the aerosols and how they're related to weather control. We interviewed military contractor Mark McCamish, 20-year weatherman Scott Stevens, who's very aware of these programs, stated that aerosols are absolutely needed to achieve the weather modification goals of these corporations. Interviewed a whole bunch of other people, including the history of weather control. It's not a new science. Weather modification has been around for over 100 years, but they've been very effective of it as of late. So it's a deep concern to us. But before we get into that, I'd like to discuss some of the health implications of these programs. And we spoke a little earlier about some of the symptoms, what people are seeing during heavy spray days. Again, the nausea, the headache, the burning eyes, irritability, and these are, again, very common during those days. But aluminum being the main ingredient, we interviewed for the first film Dr. Bourne, and she's a physician who who treats people with heavy metal toxicity and aluminum toxicity. Aluminum is very toxic, and it's showing up in blood tests. Since we released the film, many people have been testing the blood. There was a group of about 26 people in Mojave County, Arizona. Out of that group, 22 people tested very high for aluminum, but barium was very significant. 22 of those people tested for what was considered to be 1,000 times over the level of barium that was considered to be elevated, huge amounts. But aluminum is very toxic. Again, it causes neurological illness, including Alzheimer's. And here in Riverside County, we've seen over a 260% increase in Alzheimer's. But it attacks and it leads to a number of neurological illnesses. And the type of aluminum that they're spraying, which is free-form aluminum or aluminum oxide, is very highly reactive. So when we inhale this, and we do after they spray these nanoparticles, which typically our body has barriers, has a blood-brain barrier and different barriers in your lungs, but they're very small. They go right past the blood-brain barrier, and they lodge into our systems, and they're very difficult to flush out. So, again, you'll see an increase in neurological illnesses, but in overall in illnesses, because they will compromise the immune system. So Dr. Bourne's, based on these plans, these proposals, and what's being found, we can expect to see an increase in many other illnesses, including cancers and other things. But barium is very toxic as well, and it's a main component in these programs. Barium lowers our immune system, which, of course, will lead to a number of illnesses. It also increases blood pressure. I've spoken to a number of emergency room physicians who are aware of the issue, and again, they said during heavy spray days, people have been complaining of the typical minor complaints in terms of health, but they said because barium increases our blood pressure, they expect to see, and they do see, an increase in heart attacks and strokes during these days. Strontium is very toxic as well. It's a carcinogen, so we're literally talking about particles that we are breathing in on a daily basis. Again, they're showing up in tests around the world. They're showing up in blood tests as well that will compromise their immune system, lead to a number of other illnesses. Respiratory mortality has gone from number 8 down to number 3 in the past 6 years, and we could go on and on and on about the health implications of these programs. They're truly unquantifiable.
Yeah. Now, is there any radiation associated that people should know about?
Not directly from the aerosols that they spray, but geoengineers are very open about the risks associated with these programs, some of which are droughts in Africa and Asia, changing, altered weather patterns. Some of the other consequences are the shredding of our ozone. Aerosols do shred our ozone. NOAA just reported a significant decline in our ozone. That is the protective layer that protects us from radiation. Deep concern of ours. The UV index is very high. Many people now are complaining that they burn much easier in the sun. I used to be able to go out in the sun for 4 or 5 hours without getting the burn. Now, after about an hour and a half, I start getting the burn, and I have to go inside. We believe that's due to the shredding of our ozone. And UV index used to go from 1 to 10. Now it goes from 1 to 15. So we believe it's directly correlated with that. Of course, due to this, we will see an increase in skin cancers and a number of other consequences with this. So this is it's a very, very serious issue, but we're making a lot of great progress.
Yeah, and anything that we can do to help, and I really implore listeners who are tuning in tonight, guys, there's not much more that's more important than the air that we breathe and the land that makes our food. And if we're breathing in toxins and plants can't grow and won't be able to grow ad infinitum, I mean, if there's not an environment, then what else is there to worry about? So share this information with people. And, you know, Michael, my thing is, you know, I don't know how old you are. I'm 39. And I know this whole thing really seems to have started in my lifetime. My co-hosts and listeners and a lot of people alive and who care about, their society and their children today are also too young to remember a time before chemtrails. So, I remember having very clear memories of being a kid, laying on my back in the grass, looking up into the sky and watching jets with their contrails. I mean, I clearly remember I'd play games with them. I'd listen to see where I thought it was and then look and see how far it was, how different it was. And another game I would play is I would stop my eye at the point where the contrail started, let the jet move on, and count the seconds until that contrail disappeared at that spot. And I mean seconds, not minutes, not hours, never, not once, being a kid, do I remember seeing a contrail, quote-unquote, persist. And then, obviously, it did start later in life, and I noticed because it wasn't like when I was a kid. So when did this whole thing start?
Well, we believe full-scale deployment started back in the 1990s, but there are pictures as early as 1974. Keep in mind, that's when the geoengineering patents were filed back in that time, but it definitely was not in full-scale deployment. And we didn't see the trails on a regular basis that we're seeing today. So contrails are very rare. They occur at certain atmospheric conditions. They need very cold air, and they also need humidity in that air. So there is a thing called persistent contrails. It is a contrail that should last a little bit longer, but it's not something that you would see in tropical regions, which we're now seeing trails on a regular basis over areas such as Northern California, desert regions, Phoenix, Arizona, and so on and so on. So what NASA is doing in geoengineers, they're stating what we're seeing is simply normal persistent contrails. Normal persistent contrails do not have a fallout of toxic amounts of aluminum, barium, and strontium that match geoengineers' plans, proposals, and a number of geoengineering patents. So there's no question, based on very basic science, but there are thousands of other dots that connect, that these programs are ongoing and wreaking literally havoc on our environment, on human health, on our children, and on our parents. Our parents, Alzheimer's now is very common. People at the age of 40, in their 40s, are having coming down with Alzheimer's. So again, it's a deep concern, but geoengineers now have appeared to ramp up their programs. We see trails more and more on a regular basis. I've done a lot of work in Maui, and when we first went out there to film about 2 years ago, there were some aerosols in the sky. They actually spray offshore, but the increase has really, really been tremendous. We've seen a great increase in those trails, but a public official, the director of health, actually became concerned about the issue, and he actually performed 30 rain tests. And again, those 30 rain tests revealed contamination of that chemtrail geoengineering footprint. So deeply concerning, but good things are happening. The more people that test, the more data that we have, and then we can bring that data to local governments who are now starting, again, to establish ordinances to ban these programs in the regions.
As long as they can get it done before the companies who are behind it have their legislation in place to override the local legislation.
Exactly. And geoengineers now are planning and calling for global governance, again, consolidating this huge amount of power into the hands of a few. And they're saying, when we establish these programs, which they already have, different countries will have a different idea in terms of the temperature that the Earth can be. Can you believe that we're talking about this? That there are people talking about what temperature to set the Earth at? They're literally playing God. And they're saying because of this, because they will be arguing, we have to create global governance to govern these programs. So it's, again, it's something that they're working very hard at. Now they are lobbying very hard to establish and make these programs legal. So it's literally a race for time. And this is the future, literally the future of humanity, because the damage that's been done. And, I was just back in Maui, and I stayed in the rainforest for a couple of months, and the wine people told me, they said, when the rains come, we expect things to get green. They said this year, everything is dying. Everything is dying. And again, when the aluminum, the barium gets into the rain, it will get into the soil, change the pH. And plant life has, most plant life has a root system that will shut down when bioavailable aluminum is introduced to it. Exactly what's happening. As a result, we're seeing a collapse of smaller farms, natural organic farms. And I interviewed several farmers for the next film, Why in the World Are They Spraying? And two of them, the first farmer has seen a 60% decline over the past 10 years in his ability to get yields, and the second farmer has seen a 70% decline in their ability to get yields. They actually built a greenhouse where they're now growing food. The food inside the greenhouse is growing well, the food outside is not. But there is a corporate solution for this problem. We know that our soils are being sterilized, but there is a new seed. It's a stress-resistant seed that will grow in this new environment and can grow in soils that are toxified with aluminum and other heavy metals, and it will grow in drought conditions and other conditions of abiotic stress.
Perfect.
So,
and let me guess, made by Monsanto?
Oh, how did you guess, Tim?
Horrific.
Did you guess?
So is Monsanto paying for the program itself?
We don't know. We don't know, but they definitely benefit. And what was very interesting to us in our research, Bill Gates is a funder of geoengineering research, and that's for public record. So anybody that wants to look into that further, you can find it by either looking at my films on truthmediaproductions.us, or you can just Google that. But what we found was Bill Gates investing in this research, in the destruction of our soils, also profits because he invests heavily in Monsanto. So connect the dots.
Well, if there was one company on this planet to invest in, then it'd probably be a pretty smart bet, because they seem to have, the U.S. governments, government officials all lined up and doing their very bidding. So it's the U.S. We definitely have a problem in the U.S. Where are they spraying other than here, though? Because I was just in Mexico for a full week, and I didn't see any spraying the whole week. So is it just the Western world? Is it just the NATO countries? Is it just over land? Is there anywhere they don't seem to be spraying?
Well, we thought so, and for a while there were reports from China that there were no trails there. In the past week, I've heard differently, certain areas in Africa, but that is changing quickly. And again, geoengineers want to block the sun over every region of our precious world. So these programs are insidious. Whether they spray over a region or not, the fallout will get into the rain and it will get into the soil. This is a corporatization of every natural system. So it's very insidious, and there is nothing left untouched on this planet from these insidious programs.
Well, I've heard of crazy levels of these minerals being found on top of the ice at the poles. Have you heard about that? Did I hear that right?
I have not seen any studies in terms of rain tests or snow tests from that region. We do know that there was as back as 40 years ago, there was a study that indicated, they called it an Arctic haze. They noted strange haze that was appearing over those regions. Again, failed to find the source of that, but it appears that they've been geoengineering those areas for a very long time, perhaps about 40 years. But this is really just a recent phenomenon in terms of the region that we're in, the United States, and then other areas in North America. But what they do, these are heavily related to weather control. And if we look at the main ingredient now, it's aluminum oxide, and aluminum is a very effective conductor in our sky. And when they spray it up, you begin to notice about 24 to 48 hours before it rains, you'll see very, very heavy trailing. What they do, they spray the metal particulate into the sky, and then through the HARP system or other technologies, they have the ability to heat that up. And a heated sky what does a heated sky do? It creates a lift. And through that lift, it creates a low-pressure vacuum and enables these corporations literally to steer storms into certain regions. This is not new technology. It was used as early back as the Vietnam War and Project Popeye, where they flooded out the Ho Chi Minh Trail with 13 feet of rain in less than an hour. So through this technology, again, they can steer storms. But I went to an aerosol research conference, and I learned one key thing. Aerosols in our sky do affect the way that clouds condense and they nucleate. So by putting different sized aerosols, these corporations literally can either build storms or diminish storms. So through this, they have the ability to completely corporatize their weather. And Tim, when I first heard that, my first question was, why would somebody want to control the weather? It just doesn't make sense. Until somebody explained to me the various motives in terms of monetary and political motives. And at the very, very low end of these programs, we found that certain corporations and individuals gain tremendously with weather disasters. Weather is actually traded as a commodity on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And the corporations that are interested are either energy companies or perhaps insurance companies. And they will essentially bet on weather. And most people believe that weather is not controllable. It's completely unpredictable. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. We have documentation on this. So if you have the playbook to what the weather is going to be, you can make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money, and you can also gain a lot of land in other resources. And what happened, if we look at, do you remember the floods in the Midwest about a year ago?
Oh, definitely. Are you talking about like the Fargo flood?
Well, I'm talking about, yeah, there were floods in the Midwest, and it was very important because what happened in the Midwest, a lot of farmers got flooded out, and many of them had to sell their farms. But the farmers that were able to keep their head above water went into buying a new seed that can grow late in the season. DuPont has the seed, Monsanto has the seed. So they were forced to replant and become dependent on these GMO seeds. But the farmers that went out of business had to sell their land. And a company owned by George Soros came in and they bought that land for pennies on the dollar. And it's directly related to Agenda 21, which essentially is an agenda to control all land and all the resources on the planet. So it's very, very effective at doing that. There are many military objectives with weather control. We spoke about Project Popeye and how that was used to give the U.S. military a strategic advantage on the battlefield. But let's look at this in the bigger picture. And we know that corporations control our military. Many of our military actions are based on the corporate agenda. And we know that Monsanto has a motto and an objective to own everything that grows. So let's say if you have a country, let's say in Africa, and this country wants to remain sovereign. They want to grow natural organic foods, and they won't sign on to your globalist agenda or your New World Order. Well, what happens if you're the people that control the weather? And here is what is happening. They can say, you know what, fine, you do your own thing. We'll see how long you last. And you can create a drought in that region. Within a year or two, that country will gladly give up both its resources and its ability to grow natural organic foods because they'll be forced into these drought-resistant seeds. And that's what's happening. It's literally the corporatization of every natural system. So it's really something that's discussed in many different prophecies and many different religions, and they talk about this oppressive system that wants to be worshipped. And the system is just that. It's this military corporate conglomerate, I call it the beast, again, that wants to have this godlike power. And if you control the weather, you can control the planet. So what they're doing through death and destruction, it's the old Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem, get a reaction from society or the farmers, then they introduce their solution, and that is how they gain market share. That is how they corporatize natural systems. And living in Hawaii was a great experience for me because I was on an organic farm, and I really learned a new way to live. For the first time in my life, I was eating off of the land. I was planting my food and really dependent off of nature, off natural seeds, the rain and sunshine. It's a very basic system. The concern there, because things are dying now, is that people and farms will not be able to grow. And that is how they do that, by genetically modifying, whether it's our weather, which leads to genetic modification of natural seeds. They literally usurp the authority of nature or the authority of God, and they bring it under the authority of corporations and thus man. And geoengineer David Keith made a statement, about a year and a half ago. He said geoengineering gives man godlike power. I think this is what he was talking about. This is literally taking things away from the natural balance so that we all serve this beast.
No, I mean, that's just absolutely astounding and disgusting, and you're right. I mean, what could be more important than educating people about this and getting it stopped? But you know, I have a suspicion that the people who are behind this are the same people who are behind a lot of things that need to be stopped, like the suppression of new technology and whatever happened on 9/11 and blah, 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 blah. This whole elite of the planet, New World Order, Illuminati, the million names. You apparently call them the beast, but we talk about them all the time on this show. And, you know, this is one piece of the puzzle, but it's probably the most important piece. Until today, I was considering the whole new energy aspect of things. You know, I wonder what could be more important than making sure that people understand that these technologies, what they are, and that they've been suppressed, and what they could do for this planet now. But if we don't have a planet, then what's the point of having energy? So, you know, I think you're completely right. This is the most important topic facing all of mankind today, and there's nothing more important. Certainly not Kendra on Top or whatever the newest reality show is, but, you know, how do we get people convinced?
Well, maybe have them watch more Dancing with the Stars. That's pretty important in this late season, you know. Just being a little facetious, Tim. You're absolutely correct. You know, there are a lot of important issues, a lot of things that are going on that need to be addressed. But this is the end game. This is a complete destruction of life itself, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And oftentimes we look at people that focus on other issues, and that may be their calling, and that's a good thing if they're within their calling. But my goal is to really help people understand the gravity of this issue. And if we don't deal with this issue, there won't be any other issues to deal with. And I mean that very sincerely. It's almost like fixing the broken kitchen cabinet when your house is on fire. If you don't deal with the fire, there will not be a cabinet. And that's how serious this is.
That's a great analogy. Now, you've got meteorologist Scott Stevens featured in the upcoming film, I know from watching the trailer. Why aren't more climate experts talking about this?
Well, if you look at Scott, he was a weatherman in the top market, had a very good following. He started addressing this, and he got fired.
Huh. Well, now I know that he spent some time in Kansas, and you know, this show is based in Kansas, and being in Tornado Alley, I'm here to tell you, dummies don't get to be meteorologists in Kansas. You don't get to go on the airwaves and be called a meteorologist and not know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And if one of these guys is telling me, yeah, there's something going on, then I'm going to be apt to listen to that. But I'm just wondering, you know, I mean, obviously job security, but I mean, I just don't understand why these guys aren't speaking out. Because I know I can look up and see this, and that's their business. You know, I can watch them build banks of clouds. I can watch where the plane approaches a cloud, turns on the chemtrail, flies over the cloud, so-called cloud, and then when it gets to the other side, just turns it off. Meanwhile, that spreads out. Another plane or the same plane comes along, does the same thing, and they just build a big bank of clouds where they just turn it on and off at will. And how do people not see this?
Well, people are waking up. The first film has had viewership of over 10 million people in Maui. Just about 95% of that population is aware of this. It's because we hit the streets. We held screenings of the film. We got public officials involved, and that's what's really needed to be done. We cannot sit back and expect other people to handle this. This is something that affects each and every one of us in a very profound way. So it's something that we have to address, whether it be on the computer, speaking like you know, addressing this on the radio, going to town hall meetings. It's something that absolutely has to be on the table. I really quickly wanted to come back and to a question that you asked, why are other meteorologists not addressing this? We're now starting to see the beginning of meteorologists starting to address this. And our hope, you know, with having Scott on the second film, and by the way, the trailer can be found at whyangels.info. It's whyangels.info. It was really to provide cover for other meteorologists to come out and speak about this. But if you look at the advertisements on TV. Who are they? Monsanto, GE, other military contractors. Those are the people that pay the people who are on TV. We're led to believe that we have a free press here in America. That is the furthest thing from the truth. We have a controlled press, and it's corporately controlled. And again, the corporations that profit, benefit, and might be behind this are the ones that are paying the checks of our people on TV. So,
well, you say might be behind this. What is the money trail? When you follow the money, what do you find? What do you know for certain?
Well, again, we know that companies like Monsanto benefit from this. They gain a tremendous amount of market share, monetary profit. We spoke about the energy companies and the insurance companies that benefit through these weather disasters. So right now, that is basically where my investigation has led. I've been working 7 days a week, around the clock, addressing this and trying to make people aware of it. But I'm planning on doing a third film called Who in the Hell is Spraying, where we're really going to dig into the finances, the corporations behind this, and hopefully put the nail in the coffin to this issue so that we can all breathe clean, fresh air again.
And so our kids can.
It's so important. It is so important. David Keith made a statement. He said it's not really a moral hazard. He was talking about geoengineering programs. He said it's more like free riding on our grandchildren. I don't want
no
like
moral hazard there.
No moral hazard at all. So I really don't want people like that making decisions with the type of food that I eat and the air that I breathe.
Completely agree. I mean, that's just a scary way of thinking. That he can actually think that. That seems pathological to me.
Well, these people are not sane. They're not sane at all. We're dealing with psychopaths, clinical psychopaths that typically get into positions of power. Unfortunately, they control the levers that control society, and that's why we're in such a deep, dark place. So it's time to take our freedom back, our sovereignty back, and our country back. And we can do that by addressing this in a prudent, effective manner, by dealing with geoengineers, their plans and proposals, and establishing ordinances to ban this. So there are a number of things that we can do.
Sorry, I think you might have cut out there at the end, Michael.
I'm still here.
Okay. All right. Well, there are probably some aspects of the conspiracy theory end of this thing that you probably might steer clear from, but I'm going to have to ask some certain things just and feel free to be like, yeah, I don't know about that, or that's just not part of our research. But there are a lot of kind of crazy, it's in the conspiracy theorist underground, you run across a lot of really out there ideas in relation to chemtrails. One pervasive thread of belief is that some of these chemtrail planes aren't really planes, but shape-shifting ET craft. Have you run across anything in your research that might point to that being valid at all?
I have yet to see any evidence on that. I don't rule anything out, but again, we have to be real careful for disinformation, whether it is or isn't. I'm not saying that it is.
Right.
But the most effective tool of the people who are hiding behind these programs and trying to put doubt in people's minds is to literally alienate, and no pun intended there, is alienate people from looking into this further. So I've seen a number of people who might not be open to those kinds of things look at that and say, you know what, this whole issue is completely bogus. I don't believe it. I'm not going to look into that. And what it does, it takes people out of their ability to address this. It takes a huge segment of society. This is an issue that we all need to take a stand, we all need to address, again, in a very prudent way, but we've had to do a lot of damage control to local government officials in establishing ordinances who had heard these types of things, and they completely discounted it. So when dealing with certain elements and certain people who might be in political positions who frankly haven't looked into those things, or they've calibrated, whether you want to call it brainwashing, you absolutely have to go in with a message that they will understand. That's the message that's very simple. Geoengineers' plans and proposals are to spray these toxins into the atmosphere. We're finding these toxins in very high levels, and they match geoengineers' plans. They match a number of geoengineering patents. We have a contamination issue. That cannot be disputed. There has been no other source of these aerosols, and it's been a very effective message in terms of bringing it to that segment of society. There are a lot of people who have dug in much deeper, and I think it's important work. I think it's very important work. The audience that we've been affected at addressing this issue to it's been the people who were not aware of it. And again, now that we've addressed it in the way that we did in the first film, we have a very active movement. We have a very effective movement, and we're starting to see this get addressed.
And so, I guess kind of what I'm hearing you say is, while there are a lot of ideas about chemtrails and the reality of chemtrails, really what we need to focus on right now is what we know in the way of environmental damage and human health damage, in order to convince the greatest number of people to look at this and to agree to get together and do something about it.
I think that's a great way, because you come in with too much speculation, too much theory, you're going to push people away. And you're going to discredit the movement. So right now, again, there are a lot of things that are plausible. There are a lot of areas that we need to look at. But right now, the prudent step has been, so far, the way that we've addressed this. And God, I'd love to look into some of the deeper things, and I will look into some of the deeper things. But it's an issue, Tim, of prudency. Prudency is saying or doing the right thing at the right time. And our objectives and goals are not to broadcast every truth that we know. It's to identify who our audience is, speak to them in a manner that will allow them to see this and activate them. This is about activating people. It's getting people behind this movement. It's about getting these programs stopped. And there's a time and place for every truth. There is a time and a place. And truth do need to be told. There's no question about that. But, again, if somebody finds it, a lot of people find it really hard to believe that our government or corporations would spray anything into our skies. So for those people, you have to go in, with just a very straight message. I happen to live in an African American community, and when I walk and talk to my neighbors here in this community, my message changes, and I can talk a little bit about population control. I can talk about eugenics, because people in my community have had generation upon generation of these things inflicted upon them. So basically what I'm saying is, know who your audience is, speak the message that they will be able to receive, and when we do that, we see miracles happen. We see people awakened and activated, and that's what I think the most important thing in terms of activism is.
Okay, understood. So to stay clear of the totally out there stuff, I still have a couple questions to ask to kind of get the last rough-hewn edges on this issue. This is a health thing. A phenomenon called Morgellons disease. I'm sure you know all about it, but it's been recently I found it's attributed to chemtrails for some reason. Do you know if that's the case, if there's actually a link to chemtrails and Morgellons disease?
Yeah, the evidence is coming in that there is a link. Clifford Carnicom of the Carnicom Institute has done a lot of great research on that specific issue. So it's something that he's an expert on, and it's a very important issue. People like Joni Mitchell, I learned that Sheryl Crow is afflicted with this. So it's something that affects a lot of people, a very small percentage of the population, but nonetheless, a lot of people. Is something that needs to be addressed. We have a symposium or an event which is going to be here in Los Angeles on August 18th. We're actually premiering Why in the World Are They Spraying? And that will benefit Morgellons research. So I'm proud to be a part of that. And again, the film's going to be premiered there, so we're going to have people coming in from all around the country, perhaps the world, to see the first part of this. But if anybody would like to see the trailer to our new film, you can just go to my website, truthmediaproductions.us. We also encourage, for the first film, it's been just an incredible activism tool. So I hand out thousands of DVDs every month, and people around the world now are passing out DVDs in their community. It's a very effective way to create a movement, get people awakened to this. So we've lifted the copyright from What in the World Are They Spraying, and we encourage everybody who purchases a copy, a DVD, to make copies and hand out for free. So again, you can go to truthmediaproductions.us. That also helps me. I live solely off of DVD sales, a very humble lifestyle. I've given up a lot to address this, but it's what needs to be done. We have to sacrifice a little bit. And if you don't have the money, please, the film is available on YouTube. Send it out, Facebook it, send it out to your email list. Really try to help us, make people aware of this. There's no greater issue that we have at hand. And I think once people see the film, whether they're on the fence or whether they do not believe this is happening, about 98% of the people that see the film that don't believe it's happening come to realize this is a truth, it's a reality, and it's something that needs to be addressed. So that's why we have it available for free.
And we also have posted that to our Facebook, both the first film and the trailer. But I do recommend going and checking out the sites whyangels.info and truthmediaproductions.com, did you say, Michael? What was the name of that last website?
Truthmediaproductions.us.
.us. Okay, excellent. So you've talked about the aluminum and stuff, or whatever it is that's in the chemtrails, causing irritability on heavy spraying days. We had somebody in the chat room ask the question, so I'm going to put it out there. Since there are mental effects, one of the out there theories, I call it an out there theory, but for all I know, it's true. Is there research into mind control going on here, or is this just one of the things that we need to, deal with later?
It's something that needs to be looked into. I interviewed Dr. Nick Begich. He's a world-renowned expert on HAARP, and he spoke about some of the mind control aspects of that program. So it's something that's plausible. It's something that we need to look into. It's not going to be a feature of my next film because we're focusing just on weather control. But, I hope it's something that we can look at in the future a little more closely because, wow, a lot of things are happening out there, aren't they, Tim?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. There's certainly a lot. And, it seems like everything is ramping up from the chemtrails, which I've noticed are really, it's just been heavier and heavier. And, UFO sightings or what have you, the stuff that we talk about on this program, yeah, things are ramping up. The government takeover of our rights, the economic collapse, on the verge. There's a lot that we're kind of teetering on the edge. The oceans are dying, blah, blah, blah. Now, that's a good question. Does the spraying have any effect on the oceans? The fact that the oceans do seem to be dying, is it related? Do we know? Can we just speculate?
Without a doubt. Again, those particulates, due to gravity, fall into the ground. They fall into the ocean. NOAA did a study on heavy metal contamination with whales, and they found thousands of times the normal amount of aluminum in our whales. So this is literally showing up everywhere. Geoengineers are now admitting to a different type of geoengineering. It's called ocean acidification. They're literally dumping iron and changing the composition of our ocean again, stating this is all about mitigating global warming, removing CO2. So, again...
But shouldn't we get a say in whether or not this happens? I mean, it's not even really acknowledged or talked about. You know, this is our planet. This is our children's planet. And we don't have a say in whether or not they're spraying this stuff in our skies. They're just doing it, and nobody's even paying attention. Nobody's looking up, apparently.
Well, we do have a say, but we have to speak. We have to have our voices heard, and that's not very difficult. You know, we have one very, very powerful tool, and that is the power of the spoken word. The human spirit is very powerful when we simply do that. So that's one of my goals, really to activate people, make them aware of the severity, and again, get them out there talking about this. This is what will save us. This is what will save the planet. But as long as people are passive, they're watching Dancing with the Stars, other programs, not addressing this issue, it will continue and it will worsen. So not to spread fear. I think fear can be very debilitating, and I hope everybody who is listening tonight, because we've addressed some things that could be fearful, but my greatest hope and my message is do not look at this issue with fear, but look at it with faith. Faith in knowing that we as a human race have the ability to create the future that we want. We have the ability to change the course of this ship, and it's very simple. Our weapons are not the weapons that they use. It's not power, it's not control. It is power, but it's power in a different manner, and it's power of the spoken word. Through that, through truth. Truth is our weapon. They're very afraid of it. That's why they use deception to try and counter this. So again, we have a great opportunity in front of us. We are the ones, we are the generation that has the ability to change this around. We just have to get active.
Do not be afraid.
That's one of our sounders here on the show. So thanks for cueing us into that one. So Michael, real quick, we're up on the end of the show here. Do you have some parting? Because that was beautiful. If you have any other parting thoughts, you know, things that you think people just need to know and understand about this topic, lay them out for us, brother.
Just watch the film. Go to my website, truthmediaproductions.us. Become versed. Get out into your community. Start discussing this. Bring it onto the table. And closing thought, keep looking up.
Amen. Amen. Well, definitely go check out those websites. You can reach us at facebook.com/extraordinaryyear, one word. So like us there, spread the word about tonight, share the show, share Michael's movies, and you know, share all the crazy stuff you find with your Facebook friends, get your family talking. You can follow me on Twitter at Tim Bravo. Next week we've got crop circles with Dr. Chet Snow. He's going to tell us why he believes our extraterrestrial friends are trying to tell us something about the Venus transit coming up at the beginning of June. And then a special episode next Thursday, May 31. Mark your calendars because Tolec is coming back. This time he's going to give us juicy details about the things and people he's been on, he's seen on trips inside Andromeda biospheres, he says. So tune in for that and literally out of this world edition of Extraordinary Year. So that's it for us. 211 days before December 21st. Keep your ear to the ground, kids. Hold on tight. It's going to be an extraordinary year.